I mean, like, this is so great that you see how much, attention your
Oh
your
my gosh.
causing.
I was like, what? This room is packed.
Yeah, that's so. Hope like after the conversation and hopefully if you get the chance of reading the book, it's truly amazing. You will follow this woman even further. You were telling me this is the 4th or 5th office you have.
Yes, this is like my 4th or 5th Google office. So now I'm like, I need to have like a Google bucket list.
Yes.
And go all over the world and see how many Google locations I can go to.
That's
and
awesome.
eat all the snacks. Because that's what I do.
So actually, I'm actually going to, before we start the conversation, there is a sentence that really caught me, and that's more from your TED Talk. Mm-hmm. And it's a bit in connection with what we just listened, which is in a world that wants us to whisper, you choose to yell. Mm-hmm. And you're not saying that everyone should be yelling necessarily, but definitely we all have a big role to play there. And that's very inspiring how you intentionally decide, like, that's it. I'm going to be speaking loud about this. What trigger?
What trigger? Because I've just never been the person to be quiet when I feel cheated. Ever since I was little, like, I was the kid who, even though, like, whenever I got in trouble for my mouth. Like, I wasn't the kid that was getting in trouble for climbing trees and like just being destructive. I was being destructive with my mouth. So if I felt like somebody did or said something that either took advantage of me or cheated me, I always had to say something, even if it got me in trouble. So like being Nigerian, we revert like elders. So we are supposed to kind of take the back seat to somebody who's older than us. I never believed in that mantra. So it always got me in trouble. So for example, if somebody's older, let's say, comes up to you and says like, you should give me your seat. In Nigerian custom, you would give up your seat. Me, I'd be like, I was here first. No. So it's just this thing where I've always been compelled to speak up whenever I felt like something wasn't okay. And it kind of followed me through adulthood. And I'm always like, why don't we point it out or point out something that's not okay? Why are we constantly quiet and allowing things to happen that we don't like? I am a huge fan of boundaries. Like, I think everybody needs to operate with boundaries because it'll make life easier for everybody, as opposed to being silently mad when somebody crosses your boundaries and you don't tell them. So it's all part of the same thing. So I've always kind of been this person. And when we talk about like injustice, I'm just like, how do we find ourselves in the place where we find ourselves, where we look around and we're like, things are not okay? I always say it's because well-meaning people are being quiet. We spend so much of our lives just deep sighing anytime things are inconveniencing us, as opposed to saying, you know what, I don't like that thing that you just did. I'd prefer you don't do it. In that moment, it is really uncomfortable, right? Because you're like, I'm going to offend them. But you just told somebody something that can allow them to adjust their behavior. Instead, we just assume people know. So even I use the example of like, okay, who here gets tagged to like random Facebook posts that have nothing to do with you? Who here actually likes it? None of us, right? So instead, you're just like, I hate when they do that. And then you keep it going. And then it happens again. And then you get irritated again. What I do is I literally will message the person. No matter if they're my friend, if they're my uncle, my cousin, I'll be like, hey, so listen, tagging me to Facebook posts, I don't like it because then it overruns my timeline. I appreciate you. I saw it, but try not to do that. And they'll be like, oh, you know what? Okay, you're right. I won't do it again. They'll do it to everybody else still. But I won't be in it no more. And I'm like, well, I said my piece. So yeah, I just think it just makes life easier because then everyone gets to adjust their behavior and then not annoy each other so much.
Absolutely. So actually what you're just seeing here is actually what you feel when you're reading the book. Because you're punching in our face with like very strong, you're judging us. And that's clear. And you're judging yourself through that. But it's always with a very strong sense of humor. But you're not afraid of like being very much...
Yeah, I'm very straightforward. Like when people say, so I've never necessarily thought I was funny. So when I read my own writing, I rarely laugh because I'm actually meaning what I just wrote. Like I said it with a straight face. So other people are laughing. I'm like, I actually meant it. But I think humor is really pointing out the absurdities of the world. I think comedy is actually in just talking about what is happening around you. So my writing is funny to people because it's just me pointing out what's ridiculous that we're seeing. And I write like I speak. So people who know me in real life will say, like, I hear your voice when I'm reading your book. And I think that's the ultimate compliment, because it means that no matter what platform you're seeing me on, whether it is a TED Talk or my podcast or my book or in person, it's always going to be the same person that you get.
Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting because I have a toddler. I think she's a monster. Even she's very nice.
Toddlers are absolutely monsters. Absolutely.
I mean, it doesn't mean that you don't love her and that she's funny, but
they are monsters.
There's a monster part.
Absolutely. Toddlers. See, here's the thing. My theory is that toddlers are supposed to be monsters because they're so cute. You cannot have a well-behaved, cute child. Just too much. That's too good. I feel like it's like an inverse relationship. The cuter they are, the less they know how to behave. It is just life's balance.
That's great. So very interesting. So you published the book 2016.
Yeah.
You have said that at that time it was like your voice at your best. Would you say that still after a few years?
I would say so. I'm still very proud of the book that I wrote. I wrote my book 2015. So May 2015 to October 2015. So 5 months. And for almost 4 years now, my book is still as timely as it was then. And I set out to write a book that was timely. I wanted my book to be the book where if somebody picked it up in 5-6 years, it's still relevant to their lives and it's still relevant to the world. And that is the book that I wrote, and that's the book I'm really proud of. And what I'm seeing lately is that there's like this resurgence of my book. I don't know if people are like rediscovering it because of my TED Talk, but every day I get tagged on Instagram of people being like, I'm at my desk reading this book, and I might get in trouble, but I'm just gonna read here and sit here and laugh. So it's actually, yeah, it is my voice at its best. It is kind of like my manifesto, if anything. So if you ever want to know who I am, read that book and it will tell you exactly who I am.
But it's very interesting. Actually, I'm Spanish,
Yeah.
and something that has happened over the last couple of years is 8th of March has become something very different, and actually has united women across political views or perspectives, and it has become a movement. We also had the Me Too movement, so that there's something in particular that people is like less afraid of calling out things that they're not comfortable with. Do you see that?
Yeah, and I think it comes with us kind of peer pressuring each other to do that. So we peer pressure each other to go to parties and do random things, and like we do that all the time. So I'm always like, why can't we peer pressure ourselves and each other to do better things? So my whole thing is my writing and the work that I've been doing for a long time is I'm hoping that with me being who I am, like really real in the way I talk and how I show up in a room as myself, no matter what room I'm in, I'm hoping that it shows somebody else that you can do the same. And I'm hoping that with me speaking up as this Black girl who was born in Nigeria, went to the US, I know what it's like to be marginalized, and I still choose to speak up, even in spite of the consequences that may come. I'm hoping it really does encourage somebody and give them the words, the language, and the courage to speak up. I actually just got a LinkedIn message last night from somebody who said they are taking a case at their office to HR because they watched my TED Talk and it gave them the courage to say, you know what, I'm going to stand up for myself. And for me, those messages are the best ones because it tells me that I'm actively making people step outside their comfort zone, strictly because I do that for myself all the time. So I do think it's a moment for us to kind of squat up in that way, speak up more, and then back each other up when we do it. So I'm hoping more of us have the courage to start speaking up more, because I don't want it to be extraordinary.
Yeah.
I don't want the person who is telling the truth in the meeting all the time and challenging people on the bad campaigns and, and saying, that person has said this thing that was offensive. I'm hoping that person who's always stepping out on an island by themselves, I'm hoping they have partners next time they step out by them. You know what I mean? So it's no longer, here I am about to challenge this thing again because nobody else is going to say anything. I'm hoping that person walks in the meeting and says, I'm going to challenge this and I'm going to have backup because somebody else is going to actually speak up and say, I believe what they just said. So that's the goal.
So actually, it's very nice to see the room. It's very diverse.
Yeah.
And actually, something that we're trying to encourage people more and more is like, we need allies. in all the fronts
So
with perspective.
I want to challenge people to even be beyond allies. Allies are passive. So allies are the people who are like, yeah, I understand and I see that that thing is not okay. That's an ally. Cool, that's cute. I think we're I think we're past the point where allyship is useful. Because a lot of people will be like, well, I'm an ally because I do think everyone should have equal rights. But then, okay, you think it. What are you going to do about it? So that's where the accomplice comes in. We need more accomplices. And those are the people who are going to be active about their beliefs and their thoughts. So you're the person who is like, yes, I saw that person be disrespected in the meeting. The ally saw it. The accomplice walks up to the person and says, are you going to make any action? Do you need my backup? That's the accomplice. We need more accomplices. Everyone is so comfortable because they're like, I'm an ally. And they're like, yes, yay, me. But if you are an ally and you haven't done anything, what are you an ally of? You know, how have you made a difference in a tangible way? So it's a concept that I learned from the protesters of Ferguson, allies versus accomplices. Their whole thing is we have to be more accomplices and less allies.
That's great. Really appreciate. Another metaphor that you use that I think is helps very much. You talk about the domino effect.
Yeah.
That people don't have to be at the front of the right movement, but it can be a little act that can cause that effect. Can you talk to us a little bit about that perspective?
Yeah, it's just the idea of, a domino, when you hit one and all of a sudden the rest of them fall. Life kind of operates the same way. There usually has to be one person that makes a move. You need one catalyst who will then allow everybody else to follow them. But here's the thing is we're always afraid to, one, be the catalyst because it is scary, because it probably means you're putting yourself out there. It probably means you're stepping outside your comfort zone. It probably means you're going to do something scary, right? And we're always waiting for that one other person to do it first, as opposed to taking it upon ourselves to be that person. So if everybody's waiting for the one person, who's going to be that one person? So I'm always like, well, somebody in the room has to choose and make the decision, because it is a decision, to be the first one, to be the domino, who will then allow everybody else to follow them. For the Me Too movement, it was Tarana Burke. Like, she started the Me Too organization 12 years ago. So when it became a hashtag and everyone was like, Me Too, she was like, oh, like, she was a catalyst. So if we don't have catalysts, then how do movements happen? But then we think about movements in terms of like these grand gestures and like the civil rights movement and like all these big things. So it feels too big for us as regular people. We're just like, I can't be that person. And I always say, like, take the pressure off. It's not necessarily about starting a movement. It's about doing one thing. And that one thing could end up spreading wildly, but it might not. But at least just do that one thing, start somewhere. So it's like a tweet. You tweet something, one person might see it or 0 people might see it, or 30,000 people might see it, 100,000 people might see it. You never know, by just doing the thing that you're compelled to do and not letting the fear of consequence always stop you. Because I always let people know that I know in a room where I'm sitting in front of the room, I am in a position of power and privilege, even if I sit in a room as a Black girl. And in those moments, my job is to disrupt what's happening because I have the mic, right? So we usually think about ourselves. Sometimes we think about ourselves as what we are marginalized in. We think about ourselves as less powerful than we are, just because we're like, I'm a woman in an industry that is full of men. Well, are you the VP of the department? You are powerful then. You are way more powerful than certain men in that room. Use that power, in a way that's going to push something forward and, make the room that you're in better.
That's awesome. So you said Black girl.
Yeah.
That's actually a theme that we talk a lot about. I was talking with Jacqueline that runs the Black Googler organization here in Dublin. Mm-hmm. And she tells me that more and more you see how these themes interconnect. Yeah. So it's like, when is the glass ceiling and when is the iron cast? Or like, how do you choose? Do you choose something to battle as a woman or something to battle as a Black person, or actually is because we're seeing more and more that actually everything is much more complex and interconnected.
Yeah, everything is definitely more complex and interconnected. As a Black woman, I'm seen as Black first before a woman, often, right? So when we talk about diversity, when we talk about power, when we talk about access, the Black usually will come first because people see that in a different way as they see white women, right? So a white woman is seen as woman first, not white first, woman. So that means our issues are different and they're multi-layered. And the things that we hit against are also different. So as a Black woman, not only am I dealing with the womanhood and having to make sure I am not too assertive in a room so people don't think I'm bossy, which I don't care about. Then I have to deal with the Black, which if you are too confident or if you speak up without emojis in your tones, people think you're too aggressive, which I also don't care about. But I have the privilege to not care about it because I work for myself. And I move in spaces where I don't have bosses. And I understand that people who are in the offices are constantly having to deal with this. Be clear that the Black woman who is your coworker is constantly checking her email over and over again before she presses send because she's afraid that somebody's going to go to HR and say she's too short because she didn't put an extra please or a compliment sandwich. You know the compliment sandwich. You want to ask somebody for a report and you need it by 5 p.m. So you have to be like, oh my God, hey girl, I love your hair. You're looking bomb today. Can I get this report by 5? Your shoes are fire. Thank you. Like, you gotta send this email with all these niceties and then you put your ask in the middle so people don't feel, because if you send an email that's like, hey, I need this report by 5, thanks. Oh my God, why is she so short to me in email? You're like, I was on the go sending this email, I just sent what I needed. You added tone to it, tone that wasn't there. And people have to constantly do this in corporate, and because you have to do your actual job and then massage people's egos at your second job. And that is exhausting. And I oftentimes, when I talk to, like people of color in corporate, this is a huge issue, where they're like, I can't show up as myself because every single day I have to play the role of non-threatening Black person to my coworker who sees me and automatically sees tone in what I just sent them when there was no tone. So it's one thing that I always, I need people to get out their feelings in business. If your coworker sends you a 1-sentence email that's like, hey, I need this thing at 5 p.m., where is the tone? Like, where did you find that tone? And this happens all the time. People go to HR. I know people who work in HR who are like, yeah, no, the reports I get are absolutely ridiculous. Adults are really sensitive. They'll be like, oh my God, she was just really short to me. Why was she short with me? Well, she sends these emails, right, where she just asks for stuff. And you're like, what was she supposed to do? Like, write you a tome and a poem and then ask you what you... So I need adults to get out their feelings. I need people to do business properly. And I need people to understand that there's unconscious bias that they carry, right? Like, the girl who walks in the office, who is not a morning person, who's like, I can't talk to nobody before 11 o'clock. I'm that person. I can't deal with people before 11 o'clock. So I know I wouldn't do well in corporate. Y'all would just think I'm rude. I would have been written up by HR a couple of times. Then I'm like, she doesn't talk before noon. Guys, I don't drink coffee either. So listen, I need to get my energy naturally. So give me some hours. But I need people to understand that unconscious bias is a huge part of our lives, like how we walk in a room and the things that we automatically expect of people and how we project things on people. We're constantly projecting our own issues on other folks. So we're like, well, this person was mean to me or this person was short to me. I had somebody who told me because I told her that the work that she did, I didn't love it. I was demeaning her. By saying, hey, like, I actually think you should fix that because there's this error. This person sees that as demeaning. Now think about that. Is two things. There's always two stories, right? There's always one person who's like, well, I'm not sure what I did that was wrong. There's always one person who's like deeply offended. And then there's actually what probably happened in the middle. Yes, maybe I could have been nicer, but I doubt the word demeaning, attack. That's another thing that happens in corporate and in offices and just in general, Black women get accused of bullying coworkers. People use the word attack and bullying against us very often, as opposed to being like, we had an interaction that didn't feel friendly, or it maybe felt short. People would actually be like, I felt bullied. And I'm like, whoa, how do we get there? It's subconscious bias. And we walk with it every day. We carry these chips on our shoulders. And we sometimes think we are allies to the point where we're like, oh, we're so good. But a lot of well-meaning people do racist and prejudiced things to coworkers, to friends, right? To people they approach every single day. And then when they're challenged about it, they instantly feel attacked and bullied, right? Because when you are not used to being checked all your life, any type of challenging will come across as an attack. And it's something that people deal with all the time. And I always wonder if people are aware that this happens right under their nose.
So, I mean, what you say is like, I wanted to bring actually something like, we are in Google. I was sharing with Luvvie, like I'm a bit more than a year in the company. And something that I thought we were in a better place is actually like how we are creating that same sense of opportunity of every single one, independently of what's your background, what's your race, and actually like even within we have created that environment. We have a lot of issues, and those issues are not only in the U.S. They also here in Dublin with a very significant multicultural.
It's a global thing. It's a universal thing. I think people always think that they're better than they are. We really do, and that is real, because you'll find that out when you've challenged somebody. That is really when you find out if somebody is an ally, when you challenge them. Because you feel like an ally when you always get along with this person. But when in a moment of conflict, you instantly switch, that person's not an ally. When people are challenged, they show who they really are. And I find that as a woman, as somebody who's challenged men in certain spaces, and the response I've gotten has been fascinating. So I'll tell you the story that I told shortly in my TED Talk about being asked to speak at a conference in Amsterdam. Europe, I can't remember where. I think it was Amsterdam, yeah. It was a tech conference. And they came to me, sent me an email, said, we'd love for you to come speak. And I was like, great. So I sent it to my manager. My manager passes back to them, gives them my fee, talks about what's required to have me in the room. And they replied back and said, well, we don't really pay speakers, so we would give Luvvie exposure. And I was like, well, I'm exposed because you came to me. So clearly, I am already very exposed. So I'm good on that. Thank you. So I was like, this is interesting. So I'm part of this thing called The List, which is a list of like 250 dope women in business and media and tech. And we talk. We tell each other stuff. We talk numbers, which is the stuff that nobody ever does, right? We talk about resources. So I would go on the list and I was like, hey, I was asked to speak at this conference. They say they don't pay speakers. Is that true? Is it like a blanket policy? South by Southwest doesn't pay any speakers. TED doesn't pay any speakers across the board, no matter who you are. So yeah, fair. So in 15 minutes, I got about 10 answers of people being like, oh, I spoke there last year. They definitely paid my way there. Oh, I spoke there and they bought my books. Oh, my guy spoke there and they paid his way and bought his books and paid his travel. Like, so I end up collecting all this information and I realized the hierarchy was white men were paid to speak at this conference. White women, their travel got paid for, so they at least had that. And then black women were asked to pay their way to speak there. That was like a clear pattern. So I was like, oh, I got to talk about this because this is a problem. So I told my agents, I was like, I'm just giving you a heads up. And I told my manager, who's here, and I was like, I want to talk about this on a larger scale because I don't think what's happening here is fair. And I'm not going to say the name of the conference, right? I'm going to give them the pleasure of that. My managers and my manager, she knows me. She knows I ain't got no chill. My agents were like, oh my gosh, if you do this, this is risky because what if other conferences see this and are like, hey, she's a troublemaker, we shouldn't hire her. I was like, I am a troublemaker, but y'all should hire me. But I was like, I have to do this because in the position of power that I'm in as a speaker who's been at it for over 8 years, who's been on some grand stages, who gets 50 speaking engagements every year, I can put some speaking engagements on the line here. I can put some money on the line. Because if I can't do that, who am I expecting to do it? Is it the person who just started last week? Is it the person who's never done a major talk? No, so I'm gonna say this. So I go on Twitter and I was like, so there's this conference that makes 15 million euros a year that wants me to pay my way to speak there. And this is not okay because I find out this pattern about payment, this pay inequality. Yo, it went crazy. Like, people on Twitter were like, oh my gosh, that's happened to me too. And then people also figured out the conference because I also did not give them clues. So people were like, oh, is it the next web? I was like, yes. No chill. So in the list was a Forbes reporter, and she hit me up. She was like, I'm seeing this thread. She's like, would you actually want to go on record to talk about this? Because I want to write a piece about it. And I was like, yeah, I would go on record. She's like, okay. And then she hit up Gary Vaynerchuk because he had keynoted the conference. And Gary decided to go on record too and be like, yeah, no, they paid me. Like he backed me up. He was like, no, awesome. I definitely got compensated. So she wrote this piece in Forbes. Oh my gosh. And the picture on the Forbes piece is my last Google talk at Menlo Park. So it's like, Luvvie at Google, hey, they don't want to pay her. So when the piece came out, he goes nuts. The dude who runs the next web sees it. European guy, doubt he's used to being challenged by a black girl or anybody, really. So he sends me and the Forbes writer an email where it was 3 paragraphs of straight dog whistle language, right? He was like, well, yeah, I mean, we do pay some speakers. We choose to pay, the ones who we feel like have the value in our market. Maybe if Luvvie was in a more urban, maybe if this was a more urban market, Luvvie could command her fee. He literally put, maybe if this was a more urban market. So let me get this straight. Y'all asked me to come, and then you say because it's not urban, because apparently white people don't understand me. Because, I must be speaking a different language. And it was great because in that moment, he proved my point. He actually proved my point, even so good that the Forbes writer copied the email and added it to the piece. And a couple of people actually pulled out from speaking at it that year. I don't know what else is going on with the next web, but in those moments, I think about that guy. You know what I mean? Like, who got challenged in this way and bulked up, like, in defense, as opposed to being like, you're right. And the fact that he basically helped prove my point was sweet because we don't get these opportunities often. I was like, yes. And that is the year that I did my TED Talk 3 months later.
There you go.
And I think about, and I use that as an example for people whenever they're afraid of like speaking up, because I did put some money on the line. I was afraid. I was like, okay, let me see. Okay, if I don't get any more speaking engagements, I guess I'm gonna have to write my second book for real. I'm gonna have to like figure out a different business model. But I knew that it was risky. Because yes, somebody could see me and be like, oh my God, if we invite Luvvie to come, is she going to, I was like, I don't make a habit out of talking about how people mistreat me in that way publicly in business. I don't. So that was not, and every week she's like, ooh, and then this person can ask me to come. I don't do that. So this was an extraordinary moment. And I'm like, again, we have to ask ourselves what we are afraid of. If the worst thing that was going to come from that was that I would get less speaking engagements, is that worth me shutting up and letting this conference continue to do pay inequality things? Is it worth me also not showing and not putting my name on the line in the way that I'm telling other people to put their names on the line? Sometimes the means justifies the end. And I just know how it encouraged other people to speak up. And oftentimes the thing that we're afraid of, that consequence doesn't come. Like, I didn't get fewer speaking engagements. I actually got more as a result of speaking up in forums. So yeah, do it, say it, and then let the chips fall. Like, just always ask yourself, what is the worst that could happen? Okay, if it happens, so what? do you die? No. You'll be okay. Figure out something else. Okay, if you go speak up at HR because something awful happened at work, or you saw something awful happen to your coworker and you happen to get demoted for it, does that mean you can't get a new job? Like, truly, does it mean you will be fired today, can't ever get a new job, and will end up homeless? Is that the case? Okay, no? Great, then why are you being quiet? Because you're afraid of a bad review? Okay, so what is the worst that can happen? You speak up in a meeting about something that's not okay. What is the worst that can happen? Okay, maybe your coworker maybe your manager then makes your life a living hell because they give you terrible assignments or make you stay at work for longer. Okay, if your work environment gets terrible, can you not get a new job? Truly, we're always afraid of the consequence, but we don't really think about, okay, if that worst thing that you're afraid of does happen, how does it end your life? Does it end your career? Does it actually end your ability to feed yourself and clothe yourself and put a roof over your head? If the answer is no, then you got to say this thing. I feel like we pass the buck too often. Somebody else, oh, that person will do it. I don't gotta do it. I don't have to do it. Then everybody's thinking, I ain't gotta do it, so nobody does it. And then you figure out, oh, nobody did it. That's how nobody did it. Everybody passed the buck.
That's awesome. So, we should get some questions from
the
crowd. I hope
Ask
you
me
have
anything.
some questions. Who wants to be the first? Who wants to be the domino?
Hi. First of all, I love to talk and I love your attitude.
Thank you.
Just something of a question that comes to my head. Like, just sometimes even when you're talking about the Me Too movement, a lot of times this is even when someone wants to speak up and is aware of all of these consequences, sometimes this thought comes to mind that am I being too, sensitive? Or, is it something that was just probably said in a joke? Or, am I being that you start to go on that route of self-doubt that am I being too oversensitive or is it really an issue? And sometimes when that happens, right, even in the Me Too movement, like I'm just taking an example of the Me Too movement, because after that I realized there were especially from guys and some girls as well, there were jokes coming that, oh, now she's gonna say Me Too. So do you see that, where is that line and how do you get rid of that self-doubt that, hey, I am raising my voice about the right thing?
The thing is that we've been told we've been too everything for a long time. Too sensitive, too much, too loud, too bossy, too assertive, right? So we've erred on the other side in order to make sure we're not too. You will always be too to somebody. It don't matter who you are. You will always be too much, too loud, too quiet, too sensitive to somebody. In those moments, honestly, just do a gut check. How am I feeling right now? Does this actually feel like something that is not okay? That is the only question to ask yourself. If the answer is yes, it does not feel okay, don't ask yourself 15 questions. Because you will always talk yourself out of those moments. You will always talk yourself out of speaking up because you'll be like, you know what? I'm not gonna be any type of trouble because I don't want to be too something. Listen, get used to being too something. You will always be too something to somebody. Like there are moments where you can even make yourself more quiet and even somebody will still find you too loud. And you're like, well, next time I need to give you something to make you feel like I was too loud, for real. So I have to say, you have to do a gut check with yourself and just figure out, did that feel good? That is really the question. Did it feel good? If it did not feel good, then that joke was not okay. And also, if the joke is making me feel like less than a person, or if the joke makes me feel like my voice does not matter, that's a terrible joke. If the joke makes me feel like I'm not safe, that's a terrible joke. So whoever's making it, boy or girl, that's a terrible joke. And here's the thing. Here's a key you can use if somebody does it, says a joke in your midst that is inappropriate, that makes you feel uncomfortable, where you're like, I want to say something, I don't know what to say, ask them a question. So let's say they make this joke, and they're like, ha, right? You should be like, I don't get it, explain that? What does that mean? Literally, just ask them the question, because then in that moment, they actually have to explain that joke to you. And if it's a racist, homophobic, just any joke that is not appropriate, that person in that moment is now put on the spot. Explain that. What does that mean? I don't get it. And then they have to be like, you know how. I know how what? Yo, ask questions. You don't even, in fact, if you want to challenge something that happens in a room, and you don't want to just say the words, that's not okay, ask questions. So ask the person, so tell me more about that. Because you make them, in that moment, sit in that thing that they just did, and then further dig deeper into it. And even they will be like, if they don't want to explain the joke to you, then even they know the joke is not appropriate. So then you got them in the corner. Just ask them questions. Just be the person that's like, really? Tell me more.
That's awesome.
And it's a great tool to use. So, yeah.
Thank you. I'm definitely going to use the question.
Hey, ask
Excellent.
questions.
So thank you very much for sharing your conference experience. As you were speaking about it and you mentioned Tech Conference in Amsterdam, I immediately thought it's the next web. And it's crazy. So I've been an attendee in 2015. I was still a student. And I also had a very misogynistic experience overall as an attendee. I wrote a Medium article about it. And it also got quite a bit of a traction. It was also shared on Twitter quite a bit. And it also got to the founder of the conference, who also gave a very lame blah blah type of reply.
Of course.
So I feel like it's crazy that happens at every single level of that conference, from attendee all the way to speaker.
I love this though, because the existence of your article and then the existence of mine corroborate each other. And that instantly gives this story more credibility. Even if you were doubting what I just said, somebody else just essentially just verified it. And think about that same type of thing in a room. Like, I want us to operate like that every single day, where you're seeing something, you believe something somebody else just said, and you think your voice is not needed in it. Your voice is absolutely needed, because you end up being somebody's backup. There's power in numbers. You and I saying the same thing right now, it's hard to be like, both of y'all lying. It's super hard to be able to be like, I don't believe it. Sure, you can maybe not believe me, or maybe you don't believe her. But then we put our stories together, and it's like, now it's harder for me not to believe you. So in a room, when you are the person who is always speaking up, I hope you have that person. And if you are not the person who's always speaking up, please back up the person who is. Here's my suggestion. When you are going into meetings, you should have a pre-meeting with your allies. Dead ass. Have a pre-meeting where you're like, okay, we're about to go into this meeting about this campaign that we already know is kind of going to be tough, right? Have a pre-meeting with the other person who you know agrees with you. And be like, hey, so in this meeting, here's what I'm going to say. Because I'm going to point out that this campaign that we want to do is not a great idea because it has misogynistic undertones, it's kind of racist, it's kind of Islamophobic, or whatever it is, whatever the reason. I have a problem with it. Do you see where I'm coming from? The other person goes, I actually do. Because you know, you see somebody in a meeting when they're deeply uncomfortable across the table from you, and y'all both making eyes like, but you're not saying nothing. Talk to that person afterwards. And then in the pre-meeting, you're like, I saw you in the meeting, you weren't digging it. I wasn't either. Great. Okay, so in this meeting, I'm gonna bring this up. Can you back me up? I got you. You instantly walk into the meeting with more confidence because you know you're not gonna be on the island by yourself when you finally do speak up. You already know you have built-in backup. And that built-in backup makes your voice stronger because two of y'all can't be ignored. One of you maybe. One of you can maybe be silenced. Two of you can't, really. And then if you get a third person, oh, come on. If you get a third and fourth person, you in that meeting winning. So if a third person's like, yeah, I actually do agree with them. I don't think this is a sensitive story that tells something that we want to say. Literally, the person who is heading the meeting, who is insisting this campaign is going to happen because they think it's the best idea ever, now has to listen. Because as a leader, you can't ignore 3 people telling you the same thing in the same moment. Because even if you want to ignore it, everybody else is watching. Get your pre-meetings together, right? Walk into the meeting with a whole wolf pack. Because then the wolf pack, nobody beats the wolf pack. They can beat you maybe as an individual. The wolf pack though, you come in there squatted up and you're like, we're ready, we're gonna do this. And then everybody walks out the room better for it because you probably just stopped something disastrous from happening. Which is what I always think about whenever like brands do awful campaigns, like the Pepsi stuff and the Dove stuff. I'm always like, there was somebody in that room who knew this was not gonna go well, who was too afraid or not empowered enough to speak up about it. There will absolutely guarantee you there's somebody along the way who was probably like, this shouldn't happen like this. But they were either lived in worked in an environment where being challenged gets you punished, which is awful. Like, and that comes from leadership down. If leadership has created an environment where they are untouchable, can't be challenged, if you listen to the Theranos doc, you'll see that thing is real. People will end up just not doing their best work because you never grow from being challenged. Either that or this person who was sitting in the room was just like, this is not my business. This is not my charge, so I'm not gonna speak up about it. Or this person was like, you know what? I'm usually the one speaking up all the time, being on the island by myself. Today I'm gonna take a break and see what happens. I'm gonna let them have it. I know there's gonna be disasters. I'm just be quiet because I'm tired of being the one that's always speaking up. And on that day, when the campaign is checked off and it goes out and people lose their minds on social because of course it's a terrible landing, I'm always like, there was definitely, this is a failure of leadership beyond just like the leader not seeing it. It means the leader has been breeding an environment where they can't be challenged, and that person who wanted to speak up did not feel like they had the place. I'm telling you, if you have a company that encourages like challenging, you will do the best work possible because in every room, if people know they're gonna call you out on your bullshit, you will show up in that room better than you were gonna show up before. Because you'll be like, if I don't show up well, if this is not gonna be a great idea, somebody's gonna call me out on it and I don't wanna be called out. So I'm gonna make sure when I step in this room, this idea has been thought through. I have figured out all the blind spots. I have figured out how to make it already good so nobody in that room has cause to challenge me on it. It will make you step up your game. I know it makes me step up my game because I surround myself with people who challenge me. Like my friends tell me I'm useless all the time. It's great. It keeps me going, right? Because I know that anything I bring to them, if it's not correct, they will call me out on it. Which means if I'm bringing it to you, it's going to be correct because I don't want you to call me out on it. So then I come up better. I show up to you better. I'm not bringing trash to you because I've already realized if it's trash, you're going to throw it out. If I know I can bring whatever to you, I just be bringing all types of stuff. And you're like, who has time for this? You didn't think this through. Why are you wasting my time? It just makes everybody's life better, easier, and you will do better work.
That's awesome.
I have a question about the fact that you said that we usually think that we think we are better than we actually are. Mm-hmm. And if you are in that kind of space and you feel like this didn't happen to me, but I know it's happening, I see on the numbers that, we are not 100% inclusive. What would be your advice to spot those things and, take action, although it's not visible or it's not super clear what that is?
Just talking about it. If it's not super clear that this thing is happening, but you feel this undertension, this undercurrent, start having conversation about it. Just being like, I know I've been feeling this thing. I don't know if anybody else has been feeling this thing. Am I tripping? Like, am I just thinking too hard about it? Even the whole too sensitive, just have the conversation. Here's how I'm feeling. Am I being too sensitive about it? Is there something else that I should be looking out for? What can we do? Because I feel this this undercurrent of tension. I think in the moments that we are not sure, use your words to say you're not sure. You can even say, I don't know what to do, but I see there's something wrong here. That's actually an action, as opposed to being quiet, trying to figure it out in your head, and then just not saying anything. I say your lack of being sure is okay. You don't always have to be sure. But I think you can talk it through because somebody else is probably feeling unsure too about the same thing. And you can, work it through. I think transparency is huge. Vulnerability is huge. In the moments when we don't know, being able to say, I don't know. We also kind of live in a society that wants us to always know. Like, everything is figure outable. If you don't know, Google it. But there's some things you can't Google. Like, you can't Google your feelings. You can't Google certain things that haven't happened. You can't Google the undercurrent, right? So be able to say to somebody, you know what, there's this thing happening. I'm not sure about it, but it doesn't feel right. It's okay. I don't know how we're expected to do business properly when, one, we're not expected to make mistakes, and then we're also not expected to admit when we're not sure. We're always supposed to know the answer. Figure it out. No, you didn't know. Say you don't know. I think talk it through. But again, I think it might even take spaces like this, right? Where maybe once a month, and I think Google has this program in other places, but just as in general, it helps to just have a space where you can be like, let's just talk freely. What's up? How you feeling? How's the environment? Do you feel empowered to speak up? You know, you may be able to, in the room of 40 other people, be able to say, I can't really put my finger on it, but things don't feel right. And then other people can be like, yeah, this is weird tension that I started noticing after this. Talk it through as a company. Talk it through as a department, as a team. But again, it has to be the environment that has fostered that, right? So hopefully it becomes the environment that then fosters that. And I think companies like Google are at least trying. You know, we'll fall short. That's to be expected. It's not going to be all of a sudden everybody's kumbaya. But the attempt is at least necessary. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you actually for just talking about this, because that actually answers part of what I was going to ask about, because I feel like it doesn't get underlined enough that you can have a conversation as opposed to immediately going to battle every time you feel that maybe, it wasn't appropriate. But so on a larger scale, I wanted to ask you, do you feel at all concerned about this sort of current surge of this, being more attentive to and sensitive? Are you worried at all that it will create a sort of this new party line and it will actually prevent some people from critically thinking about these issues because there will be things they're literally not allowing them to think about at all? And I'm mainly referring to, like, for example, a couple of months ago in The Nation, there was this controversy with a poem that was published by a white poet, and it was mimicking about a homeless person, mimicking a way that some people thought some ethnicities speak, and then it was disavowed immediately by the editorial board who published it. So are you worried at all about this actually stifling conversation out of fear?
No, because if this stops you, if the idea of being challenged stops you from speaking, I think you're taking the easy way out. I know now, especially now, people are like, oh my God, everybody's not being so PC. We're afraid to say anything. No, what's actually happening is people are now, probably for the first time ever, being like, people who are poor, black, gay, trans, they deserve to be treated like whole human beings, which means the old jokes and the old do whatever, say whatever won't fly. If people are like, well, now I can't make jokes, now comedy's dead. If comedy and if content has always been based in the oppression of other people, then it's been trashed for centuries, right? So right now we're at a place where we're all being challenged to be better than we've been. It means maybe don't make the joke about ha 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 boobs in office when before it was fine, it could fly, right? So now men are like, oh my God, I can't even make jokes about boobs. No, there are other jokes to make. What is this? I think this is where I think the conversation and safe spaces are important, because you have to have a place where you can go to speak freely, be given grace, and not necessarily like hung out to dry like Ned Stark for it. I think there need to be people you trust in your life who you can go to. I think everyone needs to have a personal board of directors. Who are the people who will challenge you in your moments of failure, who will pump you up in the moments when you need it. And I always, whenever I make mistakes, I go to my board of directors. And they'll be like, yeah, you did misstep there. And I'd be like, okay, if you said that to me, and you're somebody who loves me, who's smart, who's thoughtful about the world, I will believe that. This doesn't mean you take on every troll on Twitter. Because no, you don't, in fact, take on 0 trolls on Twitter. But also listen to the actual constructive criticism. So a poem where a white man is attempting to speak like somebody who he has no idea whose lives really, like what their lives really like, it's punching down. That's the rule, right? The rule essentially is don't punch down, which is you shouldn't make fun of people who are less, like who are more marginalized than you, essentially. So, which is why black folks can make fun of white people. Like that, because we're punching up. But the inverse is not allowed. Same thing. I can't make fun of somebody who is trans, but they can absolutely make fun of me. I can't make fun of them for their trans identity. I can make fun of other things, right? Because like maybe they're Scientologists. But like, I'm terrible. I'm working on it. But the concept is always punch up, not punch down, which means if you're gonna talk about somebody's identity and use it in a point of a joke, it can't be a point of identity that is more marginalized than yours. So I can't make fun, I'm Christian, I can't make a joke about somebody's Muslim identity. I am straight, I can't make a joke about somebody's gay identity. You know what I mean? Like, so you have to kind of operate in that way. So a white man who is well off writing a poem that essentially is making fun of somebody who's homeless is punching down.
Well, he wasn't making fun of that. That's my. I
Well,
mean,
know the
obviously,
poem,
I didn't
right?
give you the. Yeah.
But essentially, think about it, right? We're also in a moment where we're seeing like fashion, for example, in the U.S. in the last month, 3 major brands have been in hot fire because they created products that look like blackface, which historically has denigrated black people. So in that moment, you can be like, well, it's just this thing with red lips that happens to be black. What if it's just fashion? Are we stifling the creativity now because of political correctness? No, it takes historical context into effect. So I think it's just an interesting time. There's going to be a lot of mistakes being made, right? Across the board. People are going to make poor choices, but we have to then fix it. When we call them in or call them out, the point is that the hope is they don't make the mistake again. They see where the error is, and that in that moment when you are challenged, you don't instantly go to, I'm being trolled, right? You also go to, okay, what have I done here that I could make sure I don't do again? And how can I be an example of what it looks like to redeem yourself? So it's an interesting time. Again, I just talk about speaking up in these moments. I'm somebody who's considered a truth teller, but I also make mistakes, right? And my mistakes are also loud mistakes because I have such a giant platform. So if I'm ever afraid of making too many mistakes and I make that stop me from speaking up, essentially, what am I losing? I can't be so afraid of making mistakes that I shut up. I just have to be willing to make mistakes and then grow from them. And that is ultimately what we can all do. If you're willing to make mistakes, you're willing to be more risky. And then when you make those mistakes, try to grow from it, try to learn from it, and then try to figure out how to not make the same mistake again.
That's awesome. Thanks so much.